Greetings, weary traveler. Tonight's story takes us far from here, across the wilds of Thedas, to a world teetering on the edge as the veil, the barrier that keeps spirits from crossing into our world, begins to weaken. Our tale follows a young mage named Elenara, trained among the Dalish clans, as she steps into a fading world of myth and danger. She searches for the truth, perhaps even a way to save the veil, and her journey will take her from rebuilt cities to ancient fortresses. So, adventurers, find a seat and prepare yourselves. Tonight's tale has a little bit of everything: courage, danger, a touch of mystery, and maybe even a familiar face or two. And if you'd like to support the channel, consider subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a comment to let me know what time it is for you right now. So whether you're a weary traveler, a curious villager, or a restless warrior, settle in, and let's see where tonight's tale will take us into the world of dragonage. Thedas, a continent of complex socio-political dynamics and arcane mysteries, faces yet another existential crisis. Nearly a decade has passed since the Inquisition's intervention in the Mage-Templar conflict and the defeat of Coryphaeus, a self-proclaimed god who sought dominion over both the physical world and the Fade, the realm of spirits and magic. However, the relative peace that followed was a fragile one, built on unstable foundations. The departure of the Inquisitor, a figure central to maintaining order, left a vacuum in leadership. The Inquisition itself has since dissolved into a loose network of loyalists, leaving many regions of Thedas vulnerable to renewed threats. The most immediate concern now lies with the Veil, the metaphysical boundary that separates Thedas from the Fade. Historically, this barrier has been stable, allowing mages and rare individuals to access the Fade without significant risk to the waking world. However, recent disturbances suggest that the Veil is weakening. The exact cause remains unclear, but numerous theories point to an event at Weishaupt Fortress, the stronghold of the Grey Wardens. Reports indicate that the hero of Varric, the Grey Warden responsible for ending the Fifth Blight over 2 decades ago, may have attempted an experiment to repair or stabilize the Veil. This experiment, according to fragmented accounts, either failed or produced unintended side effects. The weakening of the Veil has allowed increasing amounts of Fade energy to leak into Thedas, resulting in spontaneous manifestations of spirits and demons, as well as the reemergence of darkspawn, creatures believed to be directly tied to the Veil's stability. Compounding the threat is the lack of coordination among the once great factions that defended Thedas. The Grey Wardens, weakened by internal strife and external distrust, have retreated into isolation. The circle of magi, though reformed, remains fractured, with many mages choosing independence over institutional control. Political powerhouses like Orleus and Varric, though stable on the surface, have little interest in matters of magic unless it directly threatens their borders. Elenara, a 21-year-old mage of Dalish origin, emerges as an unlikely but crucial figure in the unfolding crisis. Unlike most of Thedas' human-dominated institutions, the Dalish maintain an understanding of the Fade that is both academic and spiritual. Elenara has been trained to perceive the subtle changes in the Fade, sensing the growing instability that others either ignore or misunderstand. Her connection to the Fade has grown stronger in recent months, manifesting through vivid dreams and whispered warnings from spirits. Though young, Elenara recognizes that the threat posed by the collapsing veil extends far beyond the typical dangers associated with magic. As the world around her teeters on the brink of disaster, Elenara finds herself drawn to Weishaupt, driven by rumors that the Warden, the very figure who once saved Thedas, may hold the key to stopping the veil's further deterioration. However, little is known of the Warden's fate. Some believe the Warden died during the experiment, while others suggest they became lost within the fate itself. Either way, if the veil is to be restored, understanding what transpired at Weishaupt is critical. This emerging threat sets the stage for Elenara's journey, where her knowledge of the Fade, her determination, and the allies she gathers will determine not only her own future but the fate of all Thedas. Elenara's journey began with a clear purpose: uncover the fate of the Warden, whose actions had inadvertently contributed to the collapse of the Veil. Her first destination was Kirkwall, a city whose name echoed across Thedas as a place of rebellion, mage uprisings, and political upheaval. Once home to Hawk, the champion of Kirkwall, the city had been a focal point for the Mage-Templar conflict. Though much of its population had rebuilt after years of destruction, the scars, both physical and psychological, were deeply embedded in its foundations. Elenara approached the city gates with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Kirkwall was an entirely different world from the Dalish forests where she had spent most of her life. While the city had been partially restored, there was no mistaking the heavy atmosphere that clung to its streets. Towering stone walls, relics of its once imposing Templar stronghold, cast long shadows over the people who moved through the bustling markets. The air was thick with the tension of a city that had seen too much blood spilled in the name of magic. Her target was Varric, the Viscount of Kirkwall, who had earned his title after years of navigating the political maelstrom of the city. Varric, a dwarf and skilled storyteller, was also Hawk's closest companion. Elenara had reason to believe that Varric knew more than anyone about the Warden's last known whereabouts. After all, it was widely rumored that Hawk had set out to find the Warden before disappearing themselves. Elenara's first challenge was securing an audience with the Viscount, a task that proved more complicated than expected. Kirkwall's ruling elite were not inclined to entertain every wandering mage who sought their counsel. Still, after a few tense exchanges with guards and a thorough explanation of her purpose, she was escorted into the sprawling keep of Kirkwall. Varric's office was a striking contrast to the grim architecture surrounding it. Bookshelves filled with leather-bound tomes lined the walls, and maps of Thedas covered much of the remaining space. A massive crossbow, unmistakably Bianca, leaned casually against the desk where Varric sat scribbling away, likely drafting yet another chapter in his extensive chronicles. "You must be Elenara," Varric said without looking up, his tone relaxed but knowing. "Rumors travel fast in this city, especially when you're asking around about Hawk and the Warden." Elenara straightened her posture, unsure whether to be more surprised by his immediate recognition or the informality with which he addressed her. "Yes, I've come to ask for your help," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I've heard that Hawk went searching for the Warden and I need to know where they went. The veil is weakening, and I believe the Warden's actions are connected to what's happening." Varric sighed, finally setting down his quill and meeting her gaze. His usual jovial demeanor was tempered with a seriousness that Elenara hadn't expected. "You're not wrong. The veil is coming apart at the seams, and it's no coincidence that it started after the Warden disappeared. But I'll tell you this. Hawk went after them because they thought it was their only shot at stopping whatever the Warden had done. Last I heard, they were heading for Weishaupt Fortress. Elenara nodded, having already suspected that Weishaupt, the ancient headquarters of the Grey Wardens, would be her next destination. Still, Varric's confirmation carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. Weishaupt was a far cry from Kirkwall, buried deep in the Anderfells, and home to an order that had become increasingly isolated and enigmatic in recent years. "I'll help you," Varric continued after a moment's pause. "But you should know, we've lost contact with Hawk. They left for Weishaupt nearly 2 years ago, and no one's heard from them since." The gravity of Varric's words settled over the room like a thick fog. Elenara had prepared herself for the possibility that the Warden's trail might lead to dead ends, but the thought that both the Warden and Hawk had vanished without a trace was unsettling. The next morning, Elenara and Varric set off from Kirkwall, heading north toward Weishaupt. They traveled lightly, with only the essentials, supplies, a few weapons, and Elenara's staff. The journey to Weishaupt was not one to be taken lightly. The Anderfells, where the fortress lay, was known for its harsh, unforgiving landscapes, as well as the constant threat of dark spawn emerging from the deep roads below. As they crossed into the rugged terrain of the Free Marches, Elenara felt the first stirrings of something unnatural. The Fade, the invisible realm from which all magic in Thedas derived, was growing more tangible. In her dreams, spirits had whispered to her, warning of impending darkness. Now, even in the waking world, the presence of magic felt stronger, as though the fabric between the two worlds was thinning with every step she took. "I take it you're feeling it too," Varric said as they paused on a ridge overlooking a vast plain. "The Fade. It's creeping closer, isn't it?" Elenara nodded, gripping her staff tighter. "It's like a pressure. I can feel the spirits. Watching. Waiting." "I figured as much," Varric muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon. "That's what worries me. The last time we dealt with the Fade breaking through, it didn't end well. And now we've got the Warden messing with it? Never a dull moment in Thedas." Their journey continued, the landscape growing more barren and desolate as they neared Weishaupt. The fortress itself, once a symbol of the Grey Warden's strength and unity, had become a place of rumors and uncertainty. Few outside the Wardens knew what transpired within its stone walls, but it was clear that the Order was no longer the stalwart shield against the blight that it once had been. As they camped one night beneath a canopy of stars, Elenara could no longer ignore the voices in the back of her mind. Spirits of the Fade, drawn to her as they often were to mages, whispered of danger. Their words were fragmented and cryptic, but the message was clear: darkness was gathering. "The spirits are restless," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Something is coming, and it's tied to the Warden. I can feel it." Varric remained silent for a moment, then chuckled darkly. "I've learned to trust my gut over the years, and right now, it's telling me we're walking into a mess. But hey, that's never stopped me before." Elenara wasn't sure if Varric's humor was meant to lighten the mood or mask his own concerns, but she appreciated the attempt. They would need more than courage and optimism to face what lay ahead. Weishaupt held the answers they sought, but it also harbored secrets that could tear Thedas apart. The closer they drew to the ancient fortress, the more Elenara realized that the Warden's ghost was not just a memory. They had left behind a legacy of unfinished business. And soon, she would have to confront the consequences of that legacy, whether she was ready or not. Weishaupt Fortress, the legendary seat of the Grey Wardens, loomed before Elenara and Varric as they arrived at its imposing gates. Nestled in the barren lands of the Anderfels, Weishaupt was as much a symbol of the Warden's power as it was a reminder of their isolation. The fortress had stood for centuries, a bastion against the Blight and a stronghold for those who swore to defend Thedas from the Darkspawn. Yet, as they approached, it was clear that something had changed. The massive stone walls, once intimidating in their grandeur, now appeared weathered and worn, as if the fortress itself had endured too many battles, both external and internal. The silence that greeted them was unsettling. There were no sounds of soldiers training, no wardens patrolling the grounds. Instead, the atmosphere was thick with tension, as though the entire structure was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Varric gave a low whistle as they passed through the gates. "It's a far cry from the tales, isn't it? I expected something a little more alive." Elenara nodded, her senses alert to the subtle shifts in magic around them. The Fade felt closer here, its presence pressing against the fabric of reality. Spirits flitted at the edge of her awareness, drawn to the disturbance that had weakened the veil. She knew that whatever had happened within these walls was far from resolved, and the fortress, despite its outward silence, was teeming with unresolved conflict. Their arrival was not met with a warm welcome. A group of Grey Wardens emerged from the shadow of the keep, their faces hard and suspicious. Elenara could feel the tension in the air, not just from the Warden's hostility, but from something deeper, an unease that permeated the entire fortress. "Weishaupt is not a place for visitors," one of the Wardens said, his voice gruff and unyielding. "State your business." Elenara stepped forward, her staff still in hand, though she held it with no intention of aggression. "We've come to seek answers. We believe the Warden who led the hero of Ferelden was conducting research here, something involving the Veil. We need to know what happened." The Wardens exchanged uneasy glances, their suspicion palpable. "You're not the first to come looking for answers," the lead Warden said after a moment. "But answers are in short supply here. The Warden is gone, and you won't find anyone willing to talk about it." Elenara's gaze sharpened. The Warden, the figure who had once saved Thedas from the Fifth Blight, had vanished, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. The Wardens, once an unshakable force, now appeared fractured and leaderless, as if the very foundation of their order had begun to crumble. Varric, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward with his characteristic diplomacy. "Look, we're not here to stir up trouble. We just need to know what happened. If the Warden was involved in something dangerous, the whole of Thedas could be at risk." The lead Warden hesitated, then nodded grudgingly. "You'd best speak to Warden Commander Adrastia. She's the only one who might give you answers, if she's in the mood." Weishaupt's inner chambers were as austere as its exterior, the stone walls adorned with ancient banners bearing the symbol of the Grey Wardens. The corridors echoed with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional clink of armor or hushed whispers. It was clear that the fortress was no longer the unified, disciplined institution it once had been. Elenara and Varric were escorted to the office of Warden Commander Adrastea, a stern woman whose expression conveyed the weight of too many burdens. Adrastea wasted no time on pleasantries. "You're here about the Warden," she said, her voice clipped. "I've told the others before you. The Warden vanished nearly 2 years ago. Whatever they were working on, it's done. There's nothing more to say." But Elenara was not so easily dissuaded. "We know the Warden was conducting research on the Veil. We've felt the effects. The Veil is weakening, and the Fade is bleeding into Thedas. If the Warden's experiments are responsible, then we need to know what went wrong." Adrastea's eyes narrowed, her posture rigid. The Warden believed that the magic of the Fade could be harnessed to repair the Veil, to strengthen it. But not everyone agreed with that theory. There were disagreements within the Order. Disagreements? Varric raised an eyebrow. "That's putting it lightly, isn't it?" Adrastea's expression darkened. "Some believed that tampering with the Veil was too dangerous, that it risked unleashing forces we couldn't control. Others, like the Warden, thought it was the only way to prevent future disasters like Corypheus. The Warden was convinced that the Veil was weakening long before it became obvious. They believed that by manipulating the magic of the Fade, we could repair it, restore balance." Elenara listened intently, her mind racing to connect the pieces. The Warden's motives were clear, but the method, using the magic of the Fade to manipulate the Veil, was far riskier than even she had imagined. The Fade was unpredictable, and any attempt to control it could lead to catastrophic consequences. "What happened to the Warden?" Elenara asked, her voice steady but demanding. "Where did they go?" Adrastea hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "The Warden's last experiment was conducted deep within the fortress, in a chamber designed to isolate the magical energies. Something went wrong. There was an explosion of Fade energy, and when the smoke cleared, the Warden was gone. Some believe they were pulled into the Fade itself, trapped beyond the Veil. Others think they might have fled, knowing the damage they'd caused." Elenara felt a chill run down her spine. The Warden's disappearance was no accident. Whatever experiment they had conducted had backfired, causing a rupture in the Veil that now threatened all of Thedas. And if the Warden was indeed trapped in the Fade, their knowledge, along with any hope of fixing the damage, might be lost forever. Varric leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "So, the Warden either got sucked into the Fade or they're hiding somewhere. Either way, it sounds like this whole thing is spiraling out of control." Adrastea's lips thinned. "The Wardens are divided. Some believe we should abandon Weishaupt and seek out the Warden, while others think we should focus on protecting Thedas from the growing threat of the Dark Spawn. Without the Warden's leadership, we're left without a clear path forward." Elenara felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The Warden's disappearance had left a void, and the consequences of their actions were now unraveling the very fabric of the Veil. The division within the Grey Wardens only added to the chaos, as the order that had once been Thedas' last line of defense against the Blight was now fractured and uncertain. But Elenara wasn't ready to give up. "The Warden's experiment may have failed, but we need to understand what they were trying to do. If we can find the source of the rupture in the Veil, we might be able to reverse it." Adrastea gave her a hard look. You don't know what you're dealing with, mage. The fade is unpredictable. Even the Warden couldn't control it. I don't intend to control it, Elenara replied, her voice firm. But we can't ignore it either. The fade is growing stronger, and if we don't act, it will consume everything. Varric nodded in agreement. She's right. Sitting around waiting for the veil to tear open isn't exactly a great plan. Adrastea remained silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on Elenara. Finally, she sighed and gestured toward a door at the far end of the chamber. The Warden's research is kept in the archives. You'll find what's left of their notes there. But be warned, whatever the Warden was working on, it's dangerous. Proceed with caution. As they made their way to the archives, Elenara's mind raced with questions. The Warden had believed that the veil could be repaired using the magic of the Fade, but the consequences of their failed experiment were now threatening to tear it apart. The knowledge they had left behind might hold the key to reversing the damage, but it could also lead to even greater risks. Weishaupt's shadows held more than just the secrets of the Warden's research. They held the fate of Thedas itself, and Elenara knew that her next steps would be critical. The Warden's ghost was more than just a memory. It was a legacy of unfinished work, and the consequences of that work were only just beginning to unfold. Weishaupt's ancient archives provided only fragments of the Warden's research, incomplete and cryptic notes that hinted at something far more dangerous than what Elenara and Varric had anticipated. The Warden had been experimenting with blood magic, an ancient and forbidden art, in an attempt to repair the veil. It was a revelation that sent a shiver through Elenara. Blood magic, combined with the volatile nature of the Fade, was a dangerous combination, one that could have catastrophic consequences for Thedas. Determined to uncover the truth, Elenara and Varric decided to take a drastic step. They would venture into the Fade itself. With the help of a powerful spirit bound to the ancient rituals of the Grey Wardens, they crossed the threshold between worlds, entering a place where time, space, and reality twisted upon themselves. The Fade was a realm of dreams, reflections of the real world distorted by the minds of the living and the energies that flowed from it. Here, the rules of physics and logic no longer applied, and every step was fraught with peril. As Elenara and Varric wandered through this surreal landscape, they were bombarded by visions, faint echoes of past events that flickered through the haze. It wasn't long before Elenara saw it. The Warden's failed experiment, played out in spectral form. The chamber at Weishaupt materialized before her, shimmering like a mirage, and there, in the center of it all, stood the Warden. Their expression was grim, their hands raised in a gesture of concentration, while arcane symbols carved into the air pulsed with power. But it was the blood on the floor that drew Elenara's attention. The Warden had used blood magic, weaving it into the fabric of their spell, attempting to harness the raw energy of the Fade. The experiment started well enough. The veil shimmered as the Warden chanted, slowly knitting itself back together. But something went wrong. The magic destabilized, the runes began to flicker, and the veil, instead of mending, began to tear. Elenara could feel the pull, the way the Fade itself recoiled from the intrusion. In an instant, the delicate balance was shattered, and the veil ruptured. A shockwave of magic erupted, and the vision of the Warden was engulfed in a maelstrom of light and shadow. As the vision faded, Elenara felt the weight of the Warden's mistake settle heavily on her. The Warden had intended to save Thedas, but in their desperation, they had only made things worse. The veil was more fragile than ever, and the experiment had left the world exposed to the forces of the Fade. But the question that lingered in her mind was this: why had the Warden turned to blood magic, knowing its dangers? And had they done so willingly, or had they been driven to it by something darker? Their path through the Fade led them to an ominous figure, a demon, its form towering and grotesque, with eyes that burned like embers. It regarded them with an unsettling calm, its voice a low rumble that echoed in the dreamlike space. "You seek the Warden," the demon said, its tone almost amused. "But what you truly seek is understanding. The Warden's actions were not without reason, though their methods were extreme." Elenara's grip on her staff tightened. "What do you know of the Warden's experiment? Were you involved?" The demon's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Involved? I was part of it. The Warden sought to stabilize the veil, to prevent the inevitable collapse. But they were not strong enough. Blood magic is powerful, yes, but it is unpredictable. The veil cannot be mended through force alone. And so, the Warden failed." Varric, standing just behind Elenara, muttered under his breath. "Demons, blood magic, and failed experiments. This just keeps getting better." Ignoring him, Elenara pressed on. "The Warden used blood magic to try and fix the veil. What were the consequences?" The demon's eyes gleamed. "The veil is fragile now, weaker than ever. It trembles on the brink of collapse, and soon the Fade will bleed into your world. The Warden's actions set this in motion, but it was not entirely their doing. The Fade has its own will, its own desires. The Warden sought to control it, but in the end, they were merely a pawn in a much larger game." Elenara felt a deep unease settle over her. The demon's words, while cryptic, rang true. The Warden's experiment had been a desperate attempt to save Thedas, but in doing so, they had unleashed forces beyond their control. Now, the very fabric of reality was at risk, and the consequences of their actions were only beginning to unfold. The demon continued, its voice softening, almost conspiratorial. "But there is still time. You could succeed where the Warden failed. You could mend the veil, if you are willing to embrace the power that they did." The pull of the Fade grew stronger, and for a brief moment, Elenara felt a flicker of temptation. The power to control the veil, to undo the damage and restore balance, was within her reach. But at what cost? Blood magic was a dangerous path, one that could corrupt even the most well-intentioned mage. She knew that to wield it would be to risk everything she held dear. "No," Elenara said firmly. "I won't make the same mistake." The demon's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold disappointment. "Very well," it hissed, before fading into the mist of the Fade, leaving Elenara and Varric alone once more. When they finally returned to the real world, Elenara felt drained, both physically and mentally. The Fade had left its mark on her, and the knowledge of the Warden's failure weighed heavily on her mind. Varric, always the pragmatist, tried to lighten the mood, but even he seemed troubled by what they had learned. Their reprieve was short-lived. As they made their way through the desolate halls of Weishaupt, a figure stepped from the shadows, his movements smooth and calculated. His features were sharp, with the grace and poise of someone who had lived far longer than he appeared. Elenara's instincts immediately warned her of danger. "I assume you're Elenara," the figure said, his voice calm and measured. "I've heard much about you." Elenara's hand hovered over her staff. "Who are you?" The figure gave a slight bow. "Fallasleep, an elven mage with a vested interest in the Veil. I know what you seek, and I can help you find the Warden." Varric, ever the skeptic, crossed his arms. "You seem awfully well informed for someone we've never met. Why should we trust you?" Fallasleep's smile was enigmatic. "Because I know where the Warden is. And because, like you, I seek to prevent the collapse of the Veil." Elenara studied him carefully. There was something unsettling about Fallasleep, something that hinted at a past shrouded in secrets. But his knowledge of the Warden's whereabouts, combined with his apparent understanding of the Veil's instability, made him a valuable, if dangerous, ally. Fallasleep's gaze settled on Elenara. "The Warden ventured deep into the Fade, beyond the reach of most mortals. But they are not lost. Not yet. I can guide you to them, but it will require great risk. The Fade is more unstable than ever, and the Warden may no longer be the person you remember." "What do you mean?" Elenara asked, her voice low. Fallasleep's expression darkened. "The Warden has spent years trapped within the Fade. That much exposure to its magic can change a person, reshape them. The Warden you seek may be a very different person than the one who led the Grey Wardens. But if you wish to stop the Veil from collapsing, you'll need their knowledge." Varric shook his head. "This just keeps getting worse." Elenara hesitated. Fallasleep's offer was tempting, but the risks were immense. Venturing deeper into the Fade, especially with someone as enigmatic as Fallasleep, could lead to unforeseen consequences. But time was running out, and if the Warden held the key to repairing the Veil, they couldn't afford to hesitate. "We'll do it," Elenara said finally, her voice resolute. "But if you're leading us into a trap, Fallasleep, you'll regret it." Fallasleep's smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I assure you, Elenara, our goals are aligned, for now." With that, the uneasy alliance was formed. Together, they would venture deeper into the Fade, into the unknown, in search of the Warden and the answers that could save or doom Thedas. The journey to the center of the Veil's collapse was a harrowing ordeal. As Elenara, Varric, and Fallasleep pressed deeper into the fractured landscape, the boundaries between the physical world and the Fade began to blur. Trees shimmered with an ethereal glow, buildings twisted and reformed in impossible ways, and the sky rippled with magic, as though reality itself were fraying at the edges. It was clear they were nearing the heart of the breach, the place where the Warden's failed experiment had torn a hole in the Veil, allowing the Fade to spill into Thedas. Each step forward felt heavier, not just because of the oppressive atmosphere, but also because of the constant threat looming behind them. Agents of Tevinter, who had somehow learned of the Veil's instability, pursued them relentlessly. The Tevinter Imperium, with its history of exploiting magic for power, saw the Veil's collapse not as a danger, but as an opportunity. If they could control the breach, they could bend the Fade, and all the magic within it, to their will. Varric had warned that dealing with Tevinter was never simple. Those snake-tongued mages will do anything for power. And if they think they can harness the fade, well, let's just say we're in for a world of trouble. Their journey was marked by fierce battles. Fade creatures, drawn to the breach like moths to a flame, ambushed them at every turn. Elenara fought back with all her magical might, channeling the energy of the Fade to push back the spirits and demons that swarmed around them. Varric, ever the crack shot, picked off enemies from a distance with his crossbow Bianca, while Fallasleep wielded ancient elven magic, dispatching foes with deadly efficiency. As the battles raged on, the bond between the three grew stronger. Despite their differences, they began to trust one another in ways that only facing death together can forge. Varric, who had been skeptical of Fallasleep's intentions from the beginning, slowly started to respect the elven mage's knowledge and skill. Fallasleep, for his part, showed a surprising amount of loyalty, never hesitating to put himself in harm's way to protect the group. But with every victory came the reminder of what lay ahead. The breach in the veil was still widening, and the strange, warped landscape around them only hinted at the horrors that awaited at its center. When they finally reached the heart of the breach, they found themselves standing on the edge of a vast chasm. The land around it seemed to pulse with energy, flickering in and out of reality, as if it couldn't decide whether it belonged to Thedas or the Fade. At the center of this maelstrom of magic stood a figure, one that Elenara had come so far to find, the Warden. But the figure before them was barely recognizable. Where once there had been a human, there was now something more and something less. The Warden's form flickered, ethereal and otherworldly, as though they existed half in the Fade and half in Thedas. Their eyes glowed with raw magical power, and their skin was marked with arcane runes that pulsed with the same strange energy as the surrounding breach. Years spent trapped within the Fade had transformed the Warden into something beyond mortal comprehension. Varric was the first to speak, his voice a low whisper. "Maker's breath. What have they become?" Elenara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Warden? Is that really you?" The Warden's gaze fixed on her, and for a brief moment, Elenara thought she saw a flicker of recognition in their eyes. But then their voice, cold and distant, echoed through the air. "I am. What remains? The Fade has changed me, remade me. I am no longer bound by the limits of mortal flesh." Elenara felt a chill run down her spine. The Warden had been one of the greatest heroes Thedas had ever known, but now, they were something else entirely, an entity caught between worlds, no longer fully human, but not quite a spirit either. And yet there was still a purpose in their gaze, a lingering trace of the Warden's old determination. "We came to fix the veil," Elenara said, her voice steady despite the growing dread. "We need to stop the breach before it destroys everything." The Warden nodded slowly. "I sought to do the same. But the magic.it is too powerful. The veil is torn, and I could not mend it alone. The only way to fully restore the veil is through sacrifice." Elenara's heart sank. "What kind of sacrifice?" The Warden's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, they seemed almost regretful. "Blood magic. The veil is tied to life, to the essence of those who live in Thedas. To repair it, one must give a part of themselves, permanently. I considered the cost, but I could not bear to make the choice." Elenara's breath caught in her throat. She had feared this moment, feared that the Warden's experiment had involved blood magic, but hearing it confirmed made the reality all the more terrifying. The Warden's transformation had come at a price, and now they were asking Elenara to make an even greater one. "You're asking me to give my life?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Warden's expression softened, but there was no denying the truth in their words. "Not your life entirely, but a part of it. Enough to mend the veil, enough to restore the balance. Blood magic is the only way." Varric stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You can't seriously be considering this, Elenara. Blood magic? This is exactly what got us into this mess in the first place." Fallasleep, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice measured but grave. "The Warden speaks the truth. The veil is a fragile thing, and it is tied to the lives of those who walk beneath it. To mend it would require a sacrifice of immense power, something only blood magic can provide. But there may be another way." Elenara looked at Fallasleep, hope flickering in her chest. "Another way?" Fallasleep nodded. "The veil is weakened, yes, but it is not beyond repair. We could harness the power of the Fade itself, channeling its energy into the breach. It would be dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than blood magic, but it could work." The Warden's gaze turned to Fallasleep, their voice filled with warning. "The Fade is unpredictable. To channel its power would be to risk everything. You could succeed, or you could tear the veil apart entirely." Elenara stood at a crossroads. On one side was the Warden's path, a grim but certain solution that would require her to give up a part of herself, perhaps forever. On the other was Fallasleep's proposal, riskier, but with the potential to save Thedas without blood magic. Both choices carried immense consequences, and the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her shoulders. She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the Fade around her, the magic that had shaped her life and guided her path. The Warden had once stood in her place, faced with an impossible choice, and now it was her turn. Elenara took a deep breath and opened her eyes, resolve hardening in her chest. "I won't use blood magic," she said firmly. "I'll find another way." The Warden's expression was unreadable, but they nodded, accepting her choice. "Then may the Maker guide your path, Elenara. For Thedas' sake, I hope you succeed where I failed." With Fallasleep and Varric by her side, Elenara stepped forward, ready to confront the breach and harness the power of the Fade. The fate of Thedas hung in the balance, and the final battle to save the world was about to begin. The air crackled with the raw energy of the Fade, its presence pressing against Elenara's skin as she stood before the gaping wound in the veil. The choice had been made. There would be no blood magic, no sacrifice of life in the way the Warden had once feared. Instead, Elenara found herself guided by something deeper, something within the Fade itself. The spirits that lingered there, neither demons nor angels, whispered to her, offering their aid in the restoration of the veil. Drawing upon her connection to the Fade, Elenara focused her energy, channeling her life force in a controlled, deliberate way. The power coursed through her veins like fire, burning but not destroying. It was a delicate balance. One wrong move could unravel everything. Varric and Fallasleep watched in silence, knowing they could do little but trust in her strength and resolve. The breach trembled, then slowly began to mend. The threads of reality and the fade, torn asunder by the Warden's failed experiment, started to weave themselves back together. But the effort took its toll. Elenara could feel a part of herself slipping away, not her life, but something intangible, something vital. She was becoming more connected to the Fade than she ever had been before, and she knew that this bond would change her forever. As the final rift sealed, the Warden's form began to fade. They had been tied to the breach, their existence sustained by the very magic that had once torn the veil apart. With the breach gone, so too was the Warden's tenuous grip on reality. They looked at Elenara one last time, their expression softening into something almost human again. "You did what I could not," the Warden said, their voice faint as they dissolved into the air. "Thedas owes you a debt." And then they were gone, lost to the Fade forever. Elenara stood in the aftermath of the battle, her body exhausted, her mind reeling from the enormity of what had transpired. The veil was restored, but she was forever altered. Her connection to the Fade had deepened, and she knew that she would never be the same again. The journey back to her people, the Dalish, felt both triumphant and somber. Elenara had succeeded where the Warden had failed, but the cost had been high. She was greeted not only as one of their own but as a revered figure, a protector of Thedas, a person who had stood at the brink of destruction and pulled the world back from the edge. But even as she rejoined her people, Elenara understood that her journey was far from over. The veil, though mended, would always remain fragile. Forces within Thedas, from Tevinter mages to unknown threats in the Fade, would seek to exploit its weaknesses again. The world was changing, and Elenara could sense that her role in shaping its future was just beginning. Standing on a ridge, overlooking the vast forests of her homeland, Elenara felt a new resolve form within her. She had seen the worst that magic could do, but also the potential for it to heal and protect. She would be Theda's guardian, watching over the veil, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead.